Hello, beloveds. Welcome to this week's Craniosacral conversation. I'm Caspian. I identify as she, her, and as a craniosacral practitioner, which just means I'm someone who practices again and again how body lives relationships, how body communicates, and how we can sense those nonverbal languages and live those nonverbal relationships as well. And so this video is sort of an addition to another video I made called Cellular Intelligence that talks a lot about slime mold and how beings, creatures, parts of life that are only single cellular organisms can make decisions, have been shown to make decisions, and slime mold is an example of that. So I wanted to go even deeper into the electron level and the photon level of showing how light makes decisions. And so I really love watching these Veritasium videos, and the video I watched is called something strange that happens when you trust quantum mechanics. Is it? Let's see. Something strange happens when you trust quantum mechanics. Veritasium, Veritasium, is the video that this is based on, because I watched that video, love the channel, and it gets me really thinking about how that knowledge can be woven into knowledge of craniosacral or bodies, however you connect with bodies and this body that you live with. And so going back to cellular intelligence, part of why that's really meaningful information, and of course you can gravitate towards what resonates with you, leave what doesn't, or pick up what might be for someone else and carry it for a while. But one reason that might be really significant information is it shows that head brain isn't the only way we make decisions as beings, and that even on the cellular level, like it's been shown that heart has a way to store memory and make decisions. Gut brain, we're talking about how many like neurotransmitters are in brain, just as many in gut, and really kind of seeing the full body wisdom. And so then we'll talk about cellular intelligence, that even at every single cell is able to make decisions and have wisdom as well. And so then I wanted to go even smaller and talk about how every electron, photon, how they might be making decisions as well, and adding to what we think is possible when making decisions, or what we think is possible with thinking or behaving. And maybe this can give a little bit of gentleness for ourselves, a little bit of tenderness, understanding for ourselves when maybe decision making, the way society has it structured now, can be so difficult, because so much of us is multiplicities and infinite, and then it's just really hard when there's these decisions that feel really like finite or something. And so let's talk about finally the video and photons. So I'll talk about the part of the video that was talking about the double slit experiment. And this is just me sort of having my own research, dabbling into watching some videos, doing some reading kind of knowledge, right? And so I want to acknowledge all the people that made this knowledge possible, all the people who cared for the people who were doing research so they were able to do their research, and honoring that a lot of Indigenous people know this in different ways, and what often gets discovered kind of just validates what Indigenous people have always known. And oftentimes there's a history of like research not giving credit to people who aren't white men. And so let's hold space for all of that anytime we're talking about research in the field of science and research. But in this double slit experiment, it's talking about how when a particle is one at a time shot through the air towards a barrier that has two slits in it, that you would expect like, oh, on the other side, we should see the electron hit just through one of those, right? But when not observed, the particle acts as a wave and goes through both simultaneously. And so then someone thought of, well, what if there's multiple slits? What if there's 5 slits that go through all of them, right? What if there's infinite slits? Well, then when you get to like infinite slits, isn't that just like how a particle wave moves through space always naturally? And is that their like natural state of like what do they do when they go through all the slits simultaneously? And so it's been shown that light, photons, and other particle waves um, actually like how they make decisions is they choose all of them simultaneously, and then what we end up seeing as light, what we end up seeing as the path of light, is the waves that interact in a constructive way towards least action. And so that term just kept coming up, and again, like I'm not so deep dive that I know all the terms, but I really love that humans decide to call that inaction, and thinking about when we make decisions and like how to learn how to flow more and thinking about least actions. So I thought I would remember the line a little bit better, but let me get that direct quote that I really loved. Light explores all paths, and the path we end up seeing is paths that interfere constructively. Paths of least action. Only paths close to the paths of least action survive, and why they are more part of why we end up seeing them. And so in the video, they're also talking about like think of a bunch of particles in a box with one hole where they can get in and get out, and that you know particles and waves go in and out being particles and waves, and so these waves happen, and a lot of waves ends up just canceling each other out, but then some waves survive that don't cancel each other out. So it's like thinking about waves that interact, was it constructively? Now I'm forgetting again. It was just like so interesting, and I wanted to share this. So again, like thinking about electrons spin, they're not actually spinning, but it's interesting that humans chose that word. And so sometimes I think we can maybe extrapolate on these words for our whole body selves, not just on the electron photon level, because humans, what are they picking up on, or what are they saying about life? What are they wanting to be concluding about life? It's all information, even if English or verbal language is limited in how we can describe these concepts. But so I'm still curious about what was that term, interfere constructively. And so thinking too about like how much we think of conflict and tension as negative, but what does interfering constructively look like in your life and in your relationships and in your relationships with all the relationships that even are just in one person in yourself? So those external and internal relationships. And so I think it's really interesting why I bring up like the cellular intelligence and then going deeper into the electron intelligence inside each of those cells is because when each electron is moving from an outer ring, so there are multiple rings and electrons can jump down and up. Sometimes they have to lose a photon, or they lose a photon in the process. They shoot out a photon when jumping from electron rings or shells, outer shells, to drop down into being different constructions. And so that makes me think of like if that's how light behaves when we think of light visibly, remembering that light is also in us as well, right? We're like shooting out little photons, little bits of light when electrons change outer shells, drop down or drop up. I'm not sure if it like happens also when they go up, but I know for sure when they drop down. Again, I'm just kind of like swimming in the waters of this information and looking around and thinking how can, as a craniosacral practitioner, I weave in these terms, these concepts, these images into a craniosacral session. And so when a client, a person coming in to receive some healing, coming in to join healing possibilities together, if they're dealing with a lot of grief from decision making, the pains of having to make one decision, this can be maybe a really beautiful ritual or theme to the session of touching in with body and feeling for the electrons, photons, interactions, and how light actually makes every decision simultaneously, and then only one is like visibly seen or only one exists maybe as like a particle path, but going the light as a wave goes through every slit simultaneously, goes through every possibility simultaneously. And so that could be a way to hold some of the grief some of us have around decision making and feeling like we possibly got it wrong, or feeling on multiplicities that even if it wasn't wrong, like different parts of us wanted to make different decisions and want to like love all those options, all those sides of ourselves, wanted to honor and respect all those sides of us at once. This is a reminder that some part of us does do that, and that isn't a side of ourselves that we need to yell at and beat at and stifle, because that's a side of ourselves that just naturally happens. So if like that information can be nourishing as a way to let go and know that some part of you does behave that way, or as a way to let go and be tender with yourself, that it's like, oh, I understand why I have that wish. I'm not just like, selfish or unrealistic, that like some part of me does live that way. So then the other parts know it's a possibility, and might be sad that all parts can't live that way currently, or something like that. I just want to like hold space for the grief that decision making can be really difficult. And especially under these systems that bring in manufactured scarcity and a lot of fears. And I just want to hold space for that decision making can be so, so tender. And think about Brene Brown's quote that I used to write on piece of paper and then twirl them into like little roses. I would attach to little chopsticks or something, and I would like pass out for a while for people. So I really love this quote, and I'm trying to remember. It was something like, even a failed dream helps you remember and be more connected with where dreams come from. And so I really love that reminder of how even if you weren't able to choose a certain path, try to like still have that path have been created or live with you in the emotional state. And thinking of like the flow and waves makes me think so much about emotions, how you can carry the lessons, you can carry the desires with you in some way, being still connected to those choices, to those people, places, opportunities. And really just I want people to feel more love for their multiplicities instead of getting frustrated or grief stricken or angry or punitive towards those sides of yourselves. And I hope this was a beautiful image and interpretation of how some part of us does live those multiplicities. Some part of us does make decisions by making all of the decisions, and thinking about what terms like inaction can mean for your life, and thinking about the wisdom of cellular intelligence as well as the wisdom of photon intelligence, light intelligence. And so, would inaction be judged on those scales? So, why judge on your scale whatever inaction means for you, as well as what does constructive interference mean for you when talking with all the relationships internally and all the relationships externally of you, human, non-human, all the relationships. And just be playful with that, right? Inviting the reminder of play. And that's kind of why I think physics, or whatever this branch of understanding might be called, is so fascinating, because it brings that playfulness into our lives again, of remembering that life is still so wild and mysterious and interconnected and playful and changing and fluid than we living in structured society can forget that it is. So this is that invitation to play, to be curious, right? Any way that you are might actually be a larger external interpretation of some way that you are very small internally. And can you love that side of yourself in that big expression of that small internal way of being? Can you love yourself? Can you be curious and trust, right? Like that's why I'm saying, when some part of you comes up that you maybe don't readily understand, or some connection that you don't already see the connection between certain ways of being and certain knowledge of how life is, that you can hold space for just maybe there is, where you don't know it explicitly, but you're living it implicitly. So thank you for being playful with me, for being curious and open. I love learning these concepts and weaving them into craniosacral, but of course I'm not doing deep dives, not an expert, but sometimes it is playful to grab some terms from some other fields, some other studies, some other ways of knowing, and think, what would that look like in this way of knowing, in this way of behaving? What would the term inaction look like in a craniosacral session or in life? What would constructive interference look like? What's the idea of like waves that cancel each other out and waves that remain, and just the different ways that we interact, like I said, with each other, and then how can we hold with the people who come for a craniosacral session, how can we hold with them the grief that can come from not always getting to honor all of our multiplicities? And could this story, this teaching, or this imagination when placing hands on a person help facilitate some of that remembering or letting go or tenderness or understanding? So watch the Veritasium video if you want a deeper dive. Again, what part of the experiments is called the double slit experiment, if you want to look up what the details, the full details of that experiment are. And I want to let's see, slow down and think about like what community events can be discussed. I keep still talking about Camp Ninokasi and Autonomous Yurt Collective, the AYU_MPLS, or St. Paul, or I think there's one in Chicago now. The ways that people can just like not wait for systems to make these changes, but like know something and do something about it and make some housing for people with yurts. You can support people getting supplies for yurts to be made, as well as supplies and food for people. So you can check out the Instagram account for Camp Ninokasi or AYU_MPLS for supporting the Yurt Collective. And then Minnesota, MN Copal, COPAL, and Release Minnesota 8 are wonderful organizations to follow if you're wanting to support people who are at risk of deportation or at risk of being sent to deportation camps or centers, and honoring that this is indigenous land and no one is illegal on stolen land, and that the original indigenous people who are still contemporarily stewards of these lands and have treaty rights, contemporary treaty rights, should be the ones making these decisions, shouldn't they? Right? So I want to let people know that you can follow Minnesota at MN Copal or at Release Minnesota 8 on Instagram or their websites. If you want to get off Instagram and not support these tech billionaires, if you want to just sign up for their newsletters, any ways to stay updated on know your rights trainings and how to recognize a warrant that ICE uses, or some people say frozen water, that ICE uses to try to detain people but have no authority. So try to do that research to look up if the warrant's not signed by a judge, if it doesn't have the person's specific name. You don't have to answer the questions. You don't have to let them in. There's a lot of information about like ICE might just be asking questions of people. Just don't answer any questions of like, hey, we're having an investigation. Can you answer some questions about this or that? Like, you don't have to. And so know your rights trainings. And let me slow down if anything else I know of is coming up. Some events got postponed because of the snow yesterday. So those are some organizations to stay connected, to be having that sense of belonging, to be your multiplicities of being also your communities, your neighbors. That's all of us are connected together. We all do better when we all do better. How to feel the life all around you, and who's getting affected, who's not being seen. How do systems make us not see some people? It makes me think about light, right? Like all those paths we might not see, but all of them were still there. So all these lives we might be made to not see, but they're still there. So how can we see them and remember them and act like the invisible is just as important as the visible? And so The Cultural Wellness Center, who makes these videos possible, is also a wonderful organization that helps you feel a sense of belonging to cultural ways, as well as to neighbors, to health, to recognize that belonging is a huge part of health. And so I'm so grateful for the Cultural Wellness Center and all the wonderful practitioners that you can see some of their videos. Maybe it's Zumba, maybe it's dancing, maybe it's sound and breath healing, yoga, or going to some in-person walks and bike rides and winter activities. So do stay connected with the Cultural Wellness Center. I'm very grateful to be a part of the Cultural Wellness Center, and I will see you all next time. I hope that everybody everywhere has access to both the resources and encouragement to be, share, feel, and nourish the gifts that you are. And I hope that everybody everywhere can have today feel like your favorite song is dancing alongside you. May you feel seen in the ways that you want to be seen by those you want to be seen by. So thank you so much, and we'll talk craniosacral another time.